On the afternoon of July 26, 2025, the peaceful atmosphere of the Nakahama residential area in Imari City, Saga Prefecture, Japan, was suddenly shattered by desperate cries for help. An elderly woman stumbled out of her house, frantically seeking assistance. The sight of her blood-soaked body, one hand trembling as she clutched a deep wound on her neck, left witnesses in shock. They quickly dialed the emergency number 110. Within minutes, the piercing sound of police sirens and ambulances broke the silence, echoing through the narrow alleys of the neighborhood. When police officers broke down the door and rushed inside, a horrifying scene unfolded in the dim afternoon light. Right at the threshold on the cold tile floor, a middle-aged woman around 40 years old lay motionless in a pool of dark red blood. The victim's body bore numerous ghastly wounds, with blood still dripping, staining the surrounding area. Not far away, investigators discovered a 70-year-old elderly woman, the victim's mother, and the same person who had just escaped to seek help from neighbors. She had completely collapsed from excessive blood loss. The emergency medical team immediately provided first aid and rushed the mother to the hospital in critical condition, while police quickly cordoned off the area off the crime scene and began searching for any clues that could lead to the perpetrator. For the experienced investigators deployed to the scene, what impressed them most was the shocking level of brutality and recklessness of the attack. The fact that an ordinary family home, in the peaceful setting of a weekend afternoon, had become the backdrop for a bloody massacre truly sent chills down their spines. The position of the victim's body lying right by the entrance indicated that the attack occurred with lightning speed, almost immediately when the door was opened. The fact that both mother and daughter became targets of the attack showed that the perpetrator acted with absolute cruelty, without any mercy or hesitation. Throughout the house, there were traces of a fierce struggle, with objects knocked over and scattered. This could have been due to the perpetrator searching for valuable property, or simply the aftermath of the desperate fight between the victim and the evil assailant. An important detail noted by forensic experts was the complete absence of the murder weapon at the scene, proving that the perpetrator had prepared and calculated carefully by taking the weapon when leaving the crime scene. When the victim's identity was clarified, the pieces of the case began to emerge more clearly. The woman who died tragically was Mukumoto Maiko, 40 years old, a single Japanese woman, daughter of the elderly homeowner. Maiko was known as an exemplary filial daughter who had decided to dedicate herself to returning home to live with her elderly mother in Imari, so she could care for the elderly woman attentively in her final years. In everyone's eyes, Maiko was always remembered as a virtuous woman with an orderly lifestyle and friendly personality, always ready to help others. Throughout her life, she had never left any bad reputation or caused conflicts with anyone in the community, nor had any notable personal grudges or disputes. Therefore, the sudden and cruel death of such a gentle woman like Maiko made everyone feel the ultimate injustice and pain at her death. Professionally, Maiko was known as a local Japanese language teacher. She not only taught Japanese language classes organized specifically for foreign residents, but also ran a freelance translation service. Maiko had dedicated a significant portion of her life to helping immigrants overcome communication difficulties, helping them gradually integrate and stabilize their lives in Japan. Regarding family, besides her frail elderly mother, Maiko had an older sister living in another region. Both sisters were born and raised in beloved Imari, and over the years had built a deep and strong emotional relationship. When the terrible news of her younger sister's tragic death reached her, the older sister was so shocked she nearly fainted, then immediately arranged everything to hurry back to their hometown to handle the final funeral arrangements for her sister. The 70-year-old elderly woman, victim Maiko's mother, became the most valuable living witness in this case. Despite having to endure unbearable pain watching her beloved daughter's life brutally taken, she still tried her best to share with police what had happened in the house. According to her account, around 4:20 p.m. on that fateful day, the doorbell rang in the quiet space. Maiko had stepped out to open the door to see who was visiting, not realizing it would be the beginning moment of tragedy. A completely unfamiliar man had suddenly rushed into the house aggressively. He pulled out a knife and threatened, while shouting in a rough voice, "Money! Give me your wallet! Everything happened too quickly. Maiko hadn't had time to react or understand the situation before being continuously attacked. In panic and maternal instinct to protect her child, the elderly woman bravely intervened, but was also injured in the process. The small house, once a peaceful family sanctuary, quickly transformed into the scene of a bloody tragedy. Through the elderly mother's fragmented and tearful account, the entire tragedy unfolded in just a few short minutes. The perpetrator committed the crime with lightning speed and immediately fled after both mother and daughter victims fell. He quickly collected the stolen money and left the scene, taking with him the blood-stained knife. However, in that moment of extreme danger, the mother managed to stand up with her last remaining strength, staggering out of the house to call for help. Her extraordinary willpower and strong survival instinct not only saved her own life but also became the key to exposing this horrific crime. The information the elderly woman provided in her weakened condition became invaluable clues. The perpetrator was a young man approximately 20 years old, with a small build, black hair neatly cut on the sides, wearing a black t-shirt and brown pants, wearing a face mask, and speaking Japanese with poor proficiency, very likely a foreigner. An extremely important detail she emphasized was that she was completely unfamiliar with this man and had no prior connection with him. The autopsy report completed on the night of July 26th further revealed the horrific brutality of this attack. Maiko's body bore numerous fatal wounds to the neck and abdomen areas, showing that the perpetrator had deliberately targeted vital organs to cause fatal injuries. The victim died instantly from excessive blood loss from these severe wounds. What was alarming was that the perpetrator's continuous attacks on positions that could cause immediate death proved that his ultimate purpose was not just threatening to steal property and flee, but truly an intentional and calculated act of murder. This discovery made the nature of the case extremely serious, forcing Saga Prefecture Police to immediately mobilize their best investigative team and top forensic experts to concentrate all resources on tracking down and capturing the perpetrator as soon as possible. The crime scene was strictly sealed off. The forensic expert team meticulously and scientifically deployed evidence collection, carefully recording every fingerprint, blood sample, and shoe print traces remaining in the victim's house. Unidentified fingerprints discovered by experts on door handles and other objects were immediately submitted for comparison with the National Biometric Database System. This was particularly significant because, according to Japanese law, all foreign nationals entering the country are required to have their fingerprints taken and stored in the management system. Parallel to waiting for laboratory results, police urgently conducted a comprehensive review of the CCTV surveillance system installed in the surrounding area. Although this area was suburban with not very dense population, fortunately, several households and nearby businesses had security camera systems. All footage from the afternoon of July 26th was collected and sent for image analysis experts to study meticulously and in detail. Indeed, the camera review yielded significant results when investigators discovered images of a young man wearing dark clothing, showing signs of haste and anxiety while moving through the area. This person's appearance time was right after 4:20 p.m., exactly the time when the attack occurred, on a small road leading from the victim's house area toward main transportation routes. Notably, this person's build and clothing completely matched the descriptions provided by the surviving elderly witness to police. Another important detail recorded from a resident's security camera angle showed that this individual had moved toward an area with many apartment buildings, used as housing for foreign workers and trainees working locally. Through analyzing the chain of images from multiple cameras, police were able to relatively accurately reconstruct the route the suspect used to escape from the scene. From the house where the crime occurred, he quickly went through a narrow alley, continued moving on a dirt road with little foot traffic, and finally disappeared into the dormitory area for trainees. What was noteworthy was that throughout the escape process, this individual was very skillful in avoiding major streets with heavy foot traffic, so no one noticed his presence, and no public surveillance camera system could clearly record his face. Based on these important clues, Saga Prefecture Police decided to adjust their investigation strategy, focusing on the foreign community living in the area around the crime scene. After contacting and coordinating with local authorities, They gathered information that there was a dormitory built specifically for foreign trainees, located about 650 yards from the house where the incident occurred. These trainees mainly worked for agricultural businesses in the area. Recognizing the importance of this clue, from the evening of July 26th continuing into the morning of July 27th, police deployed forces to the dormitory to conduct investigations. They quickly compiled a list of all foreign young men aged 20 to 30 currently residing there. During the screening process, one name particularly caught investigators' attention. Dam Duy Cong, 24 years old, Vietnamese nationality. What was notable was that all of this person's characteristics, from age, body build, to neatly cut hairstyle on the sides, showed significant similarities to the detailed descriptions provided by the surviving witness to police. Through conversations with the dormitory manager, investigators learned that Cong had lived there for about over 2 years and was currently working for one of the agricultural companies based locally. However, what made everyone more suspicious was the fact that on the very afternoon of July 26th, the time of the attack, Cong had a day off and was alone in his private room, meaning there were no witnesses who could confirm or deny whether he was present at his residence. In complete contrast to Cong's situation, most other trainees could clearly prove their whereabouts at that time. They were present at work according to prearranged shifts or participating in collective activities in common areas, witnessed by many others. These abnormal factors gradually made all suspicion and doubt from the investigation team focus clearly toward Dam Duy Cong. On the late afternoon of July 27th, when all indirect evidence had gradually formed a relatively clear picture, police decided to take direct approach to the suspicious subject. At exactly 7:12 p.m. that same day, the detective team arrived at the dormitory and knocked on Cong's door under the pretext of inviting him to assist authorities in investigating the case. Surprisingly, when faced with the sudden appearance of police, Cong showed a quite calm attitude without signs of panic or confusion. He agreed to go with police to the station voluntarily, without coercion or use of restraint measures, and no formal charges had been filed yet. At the police station, with the assistance of a Vietnamese interpreter, a preliminary interrogation was conducted to understand Cong's connection to the case. However, his attitude changed noticeably, from initial calmness to a cold and inexplicably silent demeanor. To all questions related to his residence, activities, and whereabouts on the previous afternoon, Cong responded with evasive answers or simply remained completely silent. Particularly, when investigators directly asked whether he knew any information related to the attack at Maiko's house, Cong only replied curtly and rigidly, "I don't want to say anything," then bowed his head and refused to continue communicating. During the night of July 27th into the early morning of July 28th, police conducted an emergency search of Cong's room in the dormitory. Here, the final decisive evidence was discovered and shed light on the entire case. Among Cong's personal belongings, investigators found a knife still stained with blood. This was the most important piece of evidence. The knife was about 5.3 inches long, with size and shape completely matching the characteristics of wounds found on the victim's body. Forensic examination results of this evidence yielded extremely important conclusions. The blood on the knife blade was confirmed to be precisely Maiko's blood, while DNA samples from human skin collected on the knife handle also showed complete matches with Cong's DNA. Not stopping there, comparison of shoe prints left at the crime scene with the shoes Cong owned also showed absolute similarity. Besides this direct evidence, police also seized the black clothing set that Cong usually wore. Although it had been washed quite clean, experts still discovered some faint brown stains on the fabric fibers, suspected to be traces of blood not completely cleaned. Simultaneously, fingerprint analysis results from the laboratory also showed 100% match between fingerprints found at the crime scene and Cong's fingerprints. Finally, in his personal wallet, police discovered a total of about $80 in cash, of which $73 was identified by investigators with high confidence as exactly the amount of money the perpetrator had stolen from the victim's family. At 12:15 a.m. on July 28th, with complete evidence in hand, Saga Prefecture Police officially issued an arrest warrant for Dam Duy Cong on serious charges including murder and organized robbery. Notably, in less than 36 hours from when the horrific incident occurred, the investigation team was able to identify, track down, and successfully arrest the suspect right at his residence area. This rapid and effective case-solving speed left a deep impression not only among professionals, but also made the entire nation's public feel reassured and confident in law enforcement capabilities. To officially announce the investigation results, in the early morning of July 28th, a press conference was held with participation from high-level representatives from Saga Police Department. In the official statement, the representative declared, "We have arrested a 24-year-old male subject of Vietnamese nationality, currently participating in a trainee program and living in the area near the crime scene. This subject is accused of committing illegal acts including homicide, property theft, and unlawful entry into another's residence." Dam Duy Cong, a 24-year-old Vietnamese youth, came to Japan through the technical trainee program, one of the popular pathways for many young Vietnamese workers seeking employment opportunities abroad. He had settled and lived in Imari City for about 2.5 years as part of a 3-year limited labor cooperation program between the two countries. In Imari, Cong was employed by an agricultural enterprise, with his main workplace being a medium-scale vegetable farm located in the city's suburban area. His daily work duties focused on harvesting and sorting vegetables grown in modern greenhouse systems. Through evaluations from management and supervisors, Kang was described as a capable worker with good responsibility awareness, able to adapt to heavy work, rarely causing trouble or creating problems in the work environment, while being quiet and quite secretive in communication. Regarding income, Kong's salary from his trainee work ranged from approximately $870 to $1,000 per month. While this income was sufficient to cover basic living expenses and allowed some savings to send home to support his family, it certainly could not be considered a luxurious income. Kong lived together with about 6 to 7 other trainees also from Vietnam in a collective dormitory arranged near the work area, just a short distance from the farm. What was notable and perhaps fateful was that this collective housing area was only 650 yards straight-line distance from Maiko's house, a truly close distance that inadvertently connected two lives that originally had no common ground into an unforeseeable tragedy. Dam Duy Cong came from a working-class family with average economic conditions in Vietnam. Like many other Vietnamese youth in the globalization era, Cong had nurtured dreams and expectations of a better life when deciding to join the trainee program to work in Japan. However, to participate in this program, he had to pay a quite large brokerage fee, possibly up to $10,000, no small amount. This was a common reality many Vietnamese trainees faced. They often began their journey in Japan with heavy debt on their shoulders, forced to work hard and save maximally in the first 1 to 2 years to pay off borrowed money. Regarding personal character, Cong was described by those around him as quite introverted, with a tendency towards self-isolation. He rarely participated in collective activities or social gatherings with friends, and hardly had habits of drinking alcohol or participating in nighttime entertainment. Most of Cong's free time was spent in his private room, browsing social media on his mobile phone. According to some roommates, Cong was someone who rarely confided or shared personal issues, which is why none of them truly understood or had deep, close relationships with him. Between Cong and victim Maiko, there was no personal relationship whatsoever. Through detailed investigation, police confirmed that Cong was never a student in Japanese classes that Maiko taught, nor had any relationship or acquaintance with her family. In reality, he was simply a resident living in the nearby area who chose her house as a specific target for his criminal act. For this reason, this case cannot be viewed as personal revenge or stemming from prior conflicts or disputes, but was actually just the result of greed and adverse circumstances that led an individual astray. The main and most direct motive that investigating agencies identified was the purpose of robbing property to steal money. However, criminal psychology experts and experienced investigators all believe that the deeper driving forces behind this behavior may be much more complex and multidimensional than what can be observed on the surface. They hypothesize that negative emotions such as frustration, feelings of desperation, or psychological disorders arising from a difficult and challenging life far from home may have gradually accumulated and grown in Kong's mind over a long period, ultimately leading him to gradually lose the ability to control himself and his actions. As of July 28, 2025, the case was still in the investigation phase and had not yet entered trial proceedings. However, with clear evidence, Dam Dui Kong would certainly be prosecuted on particularly serious charges such as murder, property theft, and illegal home invasion. Under Japanese law, murder combined with robbery is one of the most severe charges, with maximum penalties of death sentence or life imprisonment without parole. The Saga Prefecture Prosecutor's Office would likely prosecute Kong at the highest level because the defendant's actions were thuggish in nature, cruelly killing the victim for base purposes. Although Kong continued to exercise his right to remain silent and deny charges, all physical evidence and witness testimony had convincingly worked against him. After being arrested, Kong was taken to Imari Detention Center to serve the investigation process. Throughout this period, he maintained a rigid attitude and resolutely remained silent, completely refusing to provide any information or testimony related to the case. Although veteran investigators with many years of professional experience persistently conducted continuous interrogation sessions, supported by professional interpreter teams to ensure effective communication, Kong still only responded with a cold and mechanical answer repeated over and over, "I have nothing to say." However, in this context, the suspect's silence could no longer conceal the truth, because all physical and scientific evidence had spoken in place of the confessions he refused to give. The chain of evidence, including the knife still stained with the victim's blood, fingerprints discovered at the scene, completely matching DNA analysis results, along with testimony from the surviving mother, all had created a complete and undeniable picture of the perpetrator's identity. The criminal plan that Kong may have thought was executed perfectly and cleverly was ultimately dismantled detail by investigation experts, step by step bringing it into the light of justice and law, making all his concealment efforts meaningless. When looking at Kong's story from a broader perspective, it can be seen that he was just one of tens of thousands of Vietnamese youth who left their homeland with dreams and expectations of a better life in Japan, but then had to face a reality full of challenges and hardships. The difficulties they faced included not only jobs requiring heavy labor with relatively low wages, but also having to endure exorbitant living costs, language and cultural barriers creating unbridgeable gaps, and sometimes facing feelings of discrimination or isolation in an unfamiliar society in a foreign land. These were aspects that received little attention, but could become dangerous factors, easily pushing a person into mental dead-end situations and ultimately leading to dark choices if they were not properly supported and cared for. Of course, what's important to emphasize is that countless other immigrant workers, despite facing similar or even heavier difficulties, continue to persevere, work hard, and maintain good, honest lifestyles. Only Kang went astray and chose the most wrong and unacceptable path. However, understanding the circumstances and pressures he experienced could somewhat help us explain why a foreign youth, who originally had no criminal record or history of law-breaking, could become so cruel and lose his humanity to such an extent. Therefore, this case was not only a tragedy for the victim's family, but also a tragedy for Kong's own life, from an immigrant worker becoming a notorious criminal in a foreign land. Looking at the victim's life, police became even more certain that she had no conflicts with any individual leading to this case. The perpetrator and victim had never known each other before. Maiko was simply an unlucky victim targeted by a stranger in a murderous frenzy. This truth made the case doubly heartbreaking because it could happen to anyone purely due to life's cruel randomness. Until now, Kong has shown no remorse or apology. Police are also extracting data from Kong's phone and computer to investigate whether he experienced psychological pressure or any incidents before committing the crime. Currently, there is no information about Kong having mental illness or criminal history in Vietnam. Japan is famous for having a strict judicial system, especially for murder crimes with robbery circumstances. And regardless of the outcome, one thing is certain: justice will be served, and the perpetrator will pay an appropriate price for his crimes. The brutal case in Imari not only took the life of a gentle woman, but also inflamed persistent nightmares about the killer's identity and the real reasons behind this savage act. And that concludes today's case. Thank you for following along, and see you in the next videos.